They kidnapped your girlfriend and or killed your brother. So let's beat some thugs to death. Hello, my name is Joe and welcome to Same Name Different Game. This episode I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be, for the first time in the history of this show, discussing a game I've already discussed. Now, if you've been watching this show for a long time, you probably remember that in the early days, more often than not, I ignored portable ports. And these first couple episodes of 2018 are going to be an attempt to make up for that. So to begin, we are going all the way back to the first episode of 2012 and talking about a series that I have covered quite a bit here, Double Dragon. So let's get started with a little history. For the uninitiated, Double Dragon was developed by Technos, directed by Yoshihisa Kishimoto, and distributed in the US by Taito, and it spawned one of the oldest and most prolific franchises in gaming. While Technos went out of business in the 90s, the series has continued without a break, first in the hands of Million, now in the hands of Arc System Works. Since its debut in arcades in 1987, an official installment has been seen in every generation of game hardware from the second generation of consoles all the way up to the modern day, and very few series can claim that. Double Dragon was something of a spiritual successor to Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun, known in the US as Renegade, the prequel to River City Ransom. According to an interview with Matt Leone for Polygon in 2012, Kunio-kun required too much localization to become Renegade, so Kishimoto was asked to make something with more international appeal. In response, he went for a style inspired by cult classics The Warriors and the Mad Max films, all of which were popular in the 80s on both sides of the Pacific. As I said way back in my original look at Double Dragon, the game was such a massive success that it commanded ports on nearly every piece of hardware under the sun. From Activision's Atari 2600 port all the way up to PlayStation 4 as part of Hamster's Arcade Archive series. The last time I looked at the versions for Nintendo and SEGA's 8-bit home consoles, so this time I'm looking at the versions for Nintendo and SEGA's 8-bit handhelds. It's Double Dragon on the Game Boy and the Game Gear. Double Dragon on the Game Boy was released in 1990, less than a year after the hardware itself. It was developed in-house by Technos and published, just like the NES version, by Trade West in North America. In fact, a lot about this game is similar to the NES version. I'd even go so far as to say it's more of a port of the NES port than a port of the arcade original. For starters, it's more like Single Dragon, with the main game only allowing one player, same as the NES. The character sprites are reduced in size to better suit the Game Boy screen, but they closely resemble the NES sprites. The stage layouts are also more similar to the NES game than they are to Kishimoto's original. The music is the classic tunes you know and love, and these are competent renditions, but they don't quite get to the level of the NES soundtrack for me personally. It even contains that weird two-player versus mode, but with only the Lee brothers present. I don't have any footage of that because I don't have 2 copies. Sorry. Although, not everything is the same. The worst part of the NES game is wonderfully absent here: the grinding. In the Home Edition, you have to get hearts by grinding for experience so you can use more techniques. But here, all your moves are available from the outset. From the jump kick, to the uppercut, to the elbow smash, no grinding required. The only move I wasn't able to confirm is the pin move, because enemies don't ever seem to stay down long enough for you to use it. Now, the enemies and weapons do line up with the NES game, though the knife is replaced with a sword, and Linda sometimes carries a bat, which she never does in the home version. Locales match the Nintendo 8-bit home version too, starting in the city, moving to a construction site, then a forest, and finally the hideout of the gang who took Billy's girlfriend Marion. While the stages are similar, they are not congruent, with some modifications made and some sections cut completely. But hey, it's a handheld game, so it shouldn't be as long as the NES, right? Right?
Well, this is where things get weird. The game itself is definitely shorter than the NES version, but it'll probably take you longer to beat, if you ever beat it, because the difficulty is wildly uneven.
To the game's credit, most of it is eminently playable even today. The moves are versatile and useful, they feel impactful, and the enemies are smart but not too skilled for the most part. Chintai and Abobo even have some new tricks up their sleeves, with Chintai being able to flip out of being thrown, and Abobo having picked up a move from Burnov in Double Dragon 2. And were it not for a couple of really bizarre decisions, this game would probably be recommended over the NES game. Seriously. Unfortunately, those decisions take it down a peg. Firstly, the levels have very few checkpoints. Some have no checkpoints, so if you die, you go all the way back to the beginning of the stage. To compound things, you don't have continues, passwords, or a stage select code. For a portable game of this vintage, that borders on unforgivable. Finally, I said the enemies aren't too skilled for the most part, but there are some harsh difficulty spikes, and they have a name: Abobo. He's not undefeatable, and if you can catch a rhythm of elbows, he goes down like a bit of a chump, but that perfect rhythm is tough to get, and if you miss a blow or get too close, he knocks the bejesus out of you.
When you put all that together, you've got a game that is pretty good, coming down to just okay. But hey, just okay is better than what Sega's 8-bit portable powerhouse got. Let's go ahead and take a look at Double Dragon on the Game Gear.
Double Dragon on the Game Gear was developed and published by Virgin Interactive and released in North America and Europe only in 1993, a year after Super Double Dragon on the SNES. And right off, I do need to point out that this is not a lift and shift port of the Master System game as many Game Gear games were. No, this is a totally unique entry in the series, and in Europe, it even carries the subtitle, The Revenge of Billy Lee. See, this game justifies being Single Dragon by setting up the story with Jimmy killed and Billy out to get revenge. Of course, Double Dragon 2 was already The Revenge, but whatever, I guess. Billy sets out to get some payback for his fallen brother, and wow, I guess while Kishimoto was influenced by Bruce Lee, Virgin was influenced by Charles Bronson, because as soon as you start the game, there's a gun for you to pick up. And that's not the only one. Later, you get a shotgun. If this isn't already telling you this isn't Double Dragon, just wait. The controls here are not in line with what you've come to expect from the series. Normally, the Lees have a button for punch and another for kick, but not here. You have attack and jump also does some attacks, oddly enough. Down and jump does a foot sweep. Jump twice does a jump kick, though that doesn't matter all that much because you can just jump into enemies Acro Circus style and do damage to them. But beyond just the controls, making sure you're lined up correctly with enemies is a much more exact science here than in most Double Dragon games.
This makes the game much more frustrating than most installments of the series, though don't get me wrong, it's still much more fun than the Atari 2600 version, for example.
Still, it's hard to shake the feeling that this game was a bit phoned in. The enemies don't resemble any of the characters you've come to expect, and they're severely lacking in personality. Take this boss. Dude looks like he just came from a Fish concert, and that's supposed to intimidate Billy Lee? Give me a break. Speaking of awful music, I'd rather listen to Trey Anastasio's Noodly Jams than the soundtrack for this game, and when you're talking about Double Dragon games, that is a cardinal sin. If I can reel things in for a moment though, I've seen this game get some serious hate. It wasn't well received when it came out, and Double Dragon fans kinda pile on when it comes to this game, but it's really not that bad. I mean, it's not good, but it's playable.
Listen, I have savaged some Game Gear games on this show in the past, and for my money, this one is definitely better than The Adventures of Batman and Robin or WWF Raw. So do what you will with that information. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and do like we always do and take a look and a listen side by side.
While the old Game Gear was considerably more powerful than the Game Boy, and in fact was sold on that very promise, it seems like Technos was just able to do better than Virgin, and so the old black and white takes it in spades for me on this one.
And that makes it time to give the edge. And the last time I did this, I couldn't decide. The NES and Master System versions both have their highs and lows, and ultimately, it's kind of a push, but this is an easy call for the Game Boy. And that's sad in its own way. I would categorize this cartridge as a missed opportunity. With all the stuff around continuing and respawning, it's a shame because the core gameplay is very solid. It's basically a smaller version of the NES game. That game you know and quite possibly love, but those little things make that one something I can't wholeheartedly recommend. But if you're interested, the card itself is cheap and it's on the 3DS Virtual Console. As for the Game Gear version, that one is not cheap and it's utterly missable. And given how not cheap it is, currently hovering around $30 in the aftermarket, I would definitely recommend missing it. If you want to play it that badly just to find out what it's all about, I would go the emulation route on that one. And that does it. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to come back next month for another portable revisitation. See you then.
We call upon the power of Double Dragon. Billy and Jimmy Lee, in disguise, take to the streets in their Double Dragon cruiser to battle Shadow Master on his Shadow Raven. He's secretly armed to destroy the twins, but they've got fire! Surprises of their own!
No one stops the Shadow Master!
Ride's over! Fire! Twin Masters of Battle! Double Dragon! Figures and vehicles sold separately.